They mistook the view for power, the way the Seattle skyline pressed its gray cheek against the glass, the rain like graphite lines scoring the morning. But windows don't confer authority. Authorship does. And for 6 unglamorous years, Jesse Carter authored the backbone of Volonic systems, the latticework of models, the data plumbing nobody saw, the neural orchestration that made executives speak in valuations instead of verbs. She was 32, bone-tired, and bright-eyed in the way only builders are, and her name lived quietly, legally, on 6 patents that let Astra breathe. People liked to say she looked good in a pencil skirt at board demos. She preferred a different metric, code running in production at scale. The day the weather changed, she arrived at 7:30 a.m., coffee in one hand, laptop in the other, feeling the familiar static of a long sprint still fizzing beneath her skin. Floors of glass, white desks, the talc scent of new carpet, all the expensive signifiers of a company that believed its future would be purchased rather than built. He was in the old CEO's office, the sun standing like he owned the light itself. Nathan Cole. Haircut with a thesis, suit priced at a developer's month of rent, a gaze that moved over the engineering floor like a customs officer deciding who was smuggling value. He saw Jesse and the look came, patronizing interest, lacquered like shine on leather. "Jesse Carter," he said across the workspace as if testing the structural integrity of her name. "Systems architecture lead." "That's correct," she replied. Neutral tone, precise distance, years of practice living inside boundaries men didn't see. He stopped just inside her air, cologne clean and costly. "I expected someone more technical looking." There was the first move. Misogyny disguised as market analysis. Marcus, her senior devie and sometime co-conspirator in keeping servers alive, stiffened. Jessie kept her voice cool. "My appearance has no correlation with the AI systems that generate 90% of this company's revenue." "Astra," he said, tasting it as though he planned to drink it. "We're restructuring." In corporate, restructuring is gravity, impersonal, inexorable, a word that causes glass to tilt in its frames. Jessie felt, more than heard, the floor shift. "The Astra architecture is built on proprietary frameworks I developed," she said evenly. "Any changes require formal review." "I'm sure we'll figure it out." His hand made a lazy cutting motion, the kind men learn in rooms where nothing essential gets made. Pretty girls shouldn't worry about the business side. Focus on making demos look good. A silence opened like a hatch in the floor. Keystrokes ceased. Screens reflected faces pretending not to witness. Jessie smiled the way a surgeon smiles before the first incision. Precise, not warm. "Mr. Cole, I hold 6 patents on the core technology Astra runs on," she said, each word notched to an evidentiary standard. "I wrote the foundational code. I architected the networks your father's company is staking its future on. If making things look good includes the $800 million valuation we secured last round, then yes, I'd do that too." A flush climbed his jaw. She turned back to her monitor, pulse steady. Later, Marcus would murmur that Nathan was bad news. Jessie did not believe in news. She believed in documentation. That morning, the world narrowed to a single verb, preserve. She opened the patent filings, the dated commits, the design memos with their unglamorous timestamps, and began off-site backups to drives she'd named after constellations. Call it paranoia. Experience had rebranded it as prophylaxis. The old histories whisper here if you're listening. The inventor and the financier, the drafter and the brand, Edison and his current wars, Hedy Lamarr and the men who ignored her frequency, hopping until the Navy needed it. In every era, there is a quiet ledger where labor and credit are reconciled with alarming delay. Jessie, who grew up reading case law with the same curiosity she brought to transformer graphs, knew the doctrine as well as the code. Work for hire boundaries, pre-existing IP, license versus assignment, the difference between possession and ownership in a world of zeros and ones. 3 weeks later, while most of the city slept under a rain that felt aged, she watched the graphs jitter. 11:45 p.m., and her debugger was open when an unfamiliar backdoor took a breath. There, access to the core AI architecture, not read-only. Extract. She followed the thread, fingers moving with the choreography of someone tracing a leak through walls. The credentials pointed to Tom Brennan, a junior who smiled too hard in stand-ups. Tom did not have clearance. Only 3 people did, and Jessie counted as one. She pulled the security feed onto her second monitor. There he was. Tom hunched, posture telegraphing guilt. And behind him, arms folded, weight forward like a coach pretending to be patient, Nathan. Jessie did not gasp. She reached for her phone, started recording the screen, file names, timing, the languid progress bar of theft. Years of her work inhaled in quiet. The screen's glow made a ghost mask of her face in the glass. She thought, not melodramatically, of all the women whose work had been appropriated under the fluorescent alibi of team effort. Morning brought the summons. Urgent Astra strategy. The room had a climate. Suits, the hush of leather on wood, a lawyer's pen tapping rhythm. Charles Cole, Nathan's father, wore that elder statesman competence that suggests the ocean recognizes him. "We're accelerating launch," he said. "We can't have external dependencies." External? Jessie let the words sit between them, as indecent as it sounded. Nathan slid a document across the table, a technology transfer. Assign all patent rights to Volonic for $50,000. It was so unserious, it was almost poetic. She pushed it back. These patents predate my employment. They're licensed under the terms you already enjoy. Arrangements change, Charles said, smile practiced. So does federal jurisdiction when you copy protected code, Jessie replied. Nathan's jaw ticked, and the word attitude arrived, weary and predictable, like a plane landing late but on schedule. She stood. "I'll be reviewing this with counsel." Outside the room, the air felt like something one could chew. She called Rachel Mears, her IP attorney, whose voice had the texture of someone who slept near a statute book. "They're extracting," Jessie said simply, sending the recording. A pause, then Rachel's verdict. "Crystal, we file expansions today. Lock variants, improvements, create a minefield." Jessie spent the weekend in the particular solitude of late-stage defense. She backed up not just code, but provenance. Emails, whiteboard photographs, notebooks with coffee halos ossified on the margins. She placed copies in 3 locations, including Rachel's office. And at 3:15 on Monday morning, she slid something new into Astra, a security hardening that strengthened authentication and rekeyed access in ways only she could orchestrate. It wouldn't break anything, not immediately. It would, however, ensure that anyone trying to renovate without the architect discovered how many walls were load-bearing. By 10, Tom had cornered her, sweat stippling his forehead. "I can't access half the modules," he blurted. "Security update," she said, sipping coffee, given Thursday's unauthorized access attempts at 11:45 p.m. The timestamp landed like a gavel. He went gray. "Nathan, I don't care which gravity you blame," she cut in. "You accessed restricted systems. Federal lines exist for a reason. Walk away, keep your mouth shut, and I won't be forced to redraw this as a criminal complaint." That afternoon, Rachel called, filing submitted, variants fenced, improvements ringed with fresh legal fire. Jessie hung up as Nathan arrived at her door, closing it too hard. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I secured my intellectual property. You're welcome." "You're sabotaging the launch. I'm enforcing the licensing." Here she pulled the agreement on screen, clauses glowing like runway lights. Attempting to steal or replicate violates terms. His laugh had too many edges. We'll sue you into dust. She reached into a drawer and placed a folder between them. Cease and desist. Drafted. Clock already ticking. This goes public 24 hours before launch unless you compensate the technology you're building your future on. $500 million for exclusive rights, or $50 million annually for non-exclusive. Pay for what you use, or explain to investors why your miracle product suddenly has no lungs. He leaned in so close she could see the expensive sleep deprivation under his eyes. You have no idea who you're messing with. No, she said, not unkindly. You don't know what it costs to build. You only know what it costs to buy. He left with the papers. The open office exhaled. Marcus appeared, eyebrows performing triage. Security's taking bets, he said. Odds aren't great. Put 1,000 on me, Jessie answered. She said it lightly, but the feeling beneath was not bravado. It was historical memory, of silent ledgers being corrected, of names restored to work, of the truth that architecture, whether of cathedrals or code, obeys gravity more than gossip. She opened a new document and titled it plainly, Astra, Dependencies and Proofs. If they were going to wage a war of appearances, she would conduct a campaign of facts. And under the gray Seattle light, she began to assemble the case that would make the glassed-in boardroom feel, for the first time, like a room with walls. If the first clash with Nathan Cole had been an insult draped in silk, what came next was outright larceny dressed in a suit. In the weeks that followed, Jessie Carter lived in a state of vigilance so taut it felt like another sense, as if she could hear the hum of her work being stalked. She had already caught them once, the junior engineer at midnight, Nathan standing over him like a shadow with a pedigree. That screen recording, pixel by pixel, was her shield. Yet she knew shields attract spears. The official summons arrived with the precision of theater. Urgent Astra strategy session, attendance mandatory. The boardroom was lit like a stage, long glass table, water poured into crystal tumblers nobody drank from. Charles Cole sat at the head, voice as warm and transactional as a banker's handshake. Nathan lounged 2 seats down, lips bent in the smirk of a man certain the script had already been written. Jessie took her seat with the calm of someone who'd seen enough scripts to know how often the endings are rewritten. Charles began. We're accelerating Astra's launch. The market window is closing. He said, closing, as if opportunity were a door that could slam on command. Nathan chimed in with mock concern. There are dependencies in the current architecture. We can't afford external liabilities. Jessie kept her voice steady. External? The word cut the air. The Astra core runs on patents I developed independently. They've been licensed to Volonic for 3 years. Nathan slid a document toward her. She didn't need to read more than the bolded title, Technology Transfer Agreement. For the price of a luxury sedan, she was expected to sign away 6 patents that represented the architecture of the entire platform. $50,000. The insult was so audacious it almost made her laugh. She pushed it back. Non-negotiable. These patents remain mine. Your license stands under the existing terms. Charles leaned forward, smile flattening. Arrangements change. So do statutes, Jessie replied. Attempting to replicate my frameworks without license qualifies as infringement. In federal court, damages start at $500 million. Nathan slammed his palm on the table. You're an employee, not a partner. Don't forget your place. Her pulse remained slow. She stood, sliding her chair back deliberately. And you don't forget yours. Employment is not ownership. I'll be reviewing this with counsel. She left before they could summon another word. The carpeted hallway seemed to tilt under her, but her mind was clear. Rachel needed to see everything. That afternoon, Jessie sent her attorney the full recording of Nathan directing Tom to access restricted servers. Within the hour, Rachel called. "This is theft, Jesse. Straightforward. We'll file patent expansions today. Every variant, every derivative, locked down." And the legal countermeasures were swift. New applications drafted, improvements defined so minutely they would choke any attempt at reverse engineering. By Sunday night, Jessie had mapped not only what she had built, but the hundreds of small modifications she could prove were hers alone. Every timestamp, every design log, encrypted and saved. She placed copies in secure cloud vaults, mailed hard drives to Rachel, and kept one copy in a fireproof safe at home. On Monday at 3:15 a.m., her hands shook only from caffeine as she wrote her first counteroffensive into Astra's veins. Authentication layers folded in like origami, subtle but absolute. No one could tamper with her architecture without her approval. She had effectively built locks within locks. And she alone held the keys. By mid-morning, Tom Brennan appeared at her door, sweat darkening his collar. "I can't access half the system modules anymore. What did you do?" Jessie sipped her coffee with deliberate calm. "Security update. Given the unauthorized access on Thursday at 11:45 p.m., I thought it prudent." She let the timestamp hang there like a guillotine. His face drained of color. "Nathan, I don't care whose orders you obeyed. You committed a federal crime under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Walk away now, Tom, and I won't press charges." He nearly stumbled out of her office. That same day, Rachel called with her update. "The expansions are filed. Everything is locked down. You've effectively salted the earth around Astra. They can't move an inch without stepping on your rights." Relief surged like oxygen. For the first time, Jessie allowed herself to think not just defensively, but strategically. This wasn't only about preserving what she had built. It was about forcing them to confront the truth. Astra didn't belong to Volonic Systems. It belonged to Jessie Carter. Nathan, however, wasn't finished with intimidation. That evening, he stormed into her office, shutting the door with theatrical force. "What did you do to the system?" His voice vibrated with anger, but underneath, she heard fear. "I secured my intellectual property. Standard procedure. You're sabotaging the launch." "No, I'm protecting my rights. Learn the difference." He leaned in close, his words hot against her ear. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Jessie met his stare, unwavering. "Actually, I do. A man who's about to discover that arrogance doesn't scale." He left with his jaw locked tight. Across the office, Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Half the floor heard that. Security's betting you won't last the week." "Put me down for 1,000 on myself," Jessie replied. That night she opened a fresh document and began writing what she titled Astra, Dependencies and Proofs. She listed every component, cross-referenced every patent, and annotated every improvement. It was evidence as narrative, a story told not in prose, but in architecture. And in the margins, Jessie scribbled the names of others who had been forced to fight similar battles. Nikola Tesla bankrupted by Edison's smear campaigns. Rosalind Franklin edged out of the Nobel by colleagues who stole her X-ray images. Hedy Lamarr dismissed until decades later when her wartime hobby became the foundation of Wi-Fi. Jessie wasn't just fighting for herself. She was writing herself into the longer story of innovators underestimated until the world couldn't afford to ignore them anymore. The war was no longer silent. It had simply moved into a phase where the stakes were tallied in billions and the battlefield was built on servers humming in the basement of a glass tower. And Jessie Carter, underestimated for the last time, was preparing to fight it, clause by clause, bite by bite. There's a point in any war where defense alone is no longer enough. For Jessie Carter, that point arrived the moment she realized Nathan's campaign had crossed from theft into harassment. Stealing her code in the dead of night was one thing, sending intrusions into her home network was another. It was 11:30 p.m. when her phone lit up with a ping from her personal firewall. The IP traced back to Volonic's servers. She screen captured the evidence, sent it to Rachel with the subject line, "They're getting desperate." Rachel replied within minutes, "This is criminal harassment. Do you want me to involve the FBI?" Jesse stared at the message for a long time before answering. Not yet. Let them dig deeper. The fall will hurt more. The next morning, she walked into an ambush disguised as a meeting. Charles, Nathan, 3 company lawyers, and a note-taker whose presence suggested a PR strategy already in motion. "Just a friendly conversation," Charles purred, gesturing to the far end of the table, isolating her seat. Jessie remained standing. "Not without my legal counsel." Charles tried charm. Nathan tried fury. Jessie countered with proof: IP logs, timestamps, the attempted break-in. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Some hadn't known how far Nathan had gone. Charles's mask slipped. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted," Jessie said. "Fair compensation and an end to your son's criminal harassment." She laid it out cleanly. $500 million for exclusive rights or $50 million annually for non-exclusive, and with every day of delay, the price rose $50 million. It was not a bluff, it was arithmetic, valuation against risk. The board bristled. Nathan shouted about extortion. Jessie calmly connected her laptop to the projector and pulled up Astra's architecture. With one keystroke, she highlighted every dependency on her patents in red. The screen bled. Then she toggled those components off, leaving behind a skeleton so bare it looked like absence itself. "This," she said evenly, "is what you have without me." The room erupted, lawyers whispering, board members demanding clarification, Charles glaring daggers at his son. Jessie stood in the storm, unmoved. She had already learned what storms are: temporary weather. Architecture endures. That night, Nathan cornered her in the parking garage, a camera conveniently malfunctioning nearby. He leaned against her car door, eyes hard. "We can make your life hell. No one in this industry will touch you when we're done." Jessie pressed record on her phone in her coat pocket. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. Sign the patents over for something reasonable, keep your career, or watch everything collapse." She stepped closer, so near he had to tilt his head down. "Nathan, you're under the impression that I need Volonic. But here's what you don't understand. I am the product. My mind, my patents, my architecture. You're just a placeholder with a trust fund. When this ends, you'll be a footnote in my story." She pushed past him, sliding into her car. In the rear view, she saw him standing frozen. In the sodium light, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. The following morning, she gathered her development team in a glass-walled meeting room. "Full documentation," she announced. "Every system, every line of code, every dependency marked by end of day tomorrow." Marcus frowned. "Insurance?" "Exactly. If anything happens to me, you'll have everything. Make sure every link to my patents is annotated in red." The team exchanged uneasy looks. They understood. Without Jessie, Astra was stillborn. Meanwhile, whispers spread across the office like contraband. Some said Jessie was being terminated. Others said she was holding the company hostage. But under the rumor, a different current was forming, a respect too long withheld. Developers saw the way she stood up to Nathan, the calm precision with which she dismantled his power plays. For years she had been reduced to the pretty face in the demo room. Now they were beginning to see her for what she was, the architect holding the entire structure aloft. When the board reconvened days later, Jessie walked into a room thick with tension. Nathan sat forward, practically vibrating with anger. Charles tried to wield civility like a weapon. "We've worked all weekend. We're prepared to offer $10 million for the patents plus a 2% stake." Jessie connected her laptop, the architecture glowing red once more. "No, my terms haven't changed." The debate spiraled into shouting, accusations, demands. Finally, Margaret Zhao, one of the few board members Jesse respected, silenced the room. "Ms. Carter, what will it take?" Jesse's voice was steady. $500 million for exclusivity. $50 million annual otherwise. Starting tomorrow, the price increases daily. She gathered her laptop, paused at the door. "You have 48 hours." The silence in her wake was heavier than any shouting. At home, Jesse stared out at the skyline. Somewhere, in a penthouse lit by ambition and desperation, Nathan Cole was pacing. She almost pitied him. He'd been groomed for power, but not for loss. Men like Nathan rarely learned until it was too late that arrogance is brittle, and brittle things shatter when pressure mounts. What he didn't know was that Jesse had already been contacted by Volanic's fiercest rival, Quantum Dynamics. Their lawyers had caught wind of her fresh filings, and the offer they dangled was already north of $400 million. The war was no longer about if Jesse would win. It was about how devastating the loss would be for the Coles. And Nathan, still convinced he was playing chess, hadn't realized Jesse had already moved to a different board entirely. Monday mornings in corporate towers are usually painted in gray routine, coffee lines, badge swipes, half-asleep engineers scrolling through error logs. But this Monday was different. Jesse Carter knew it from the way the receptionist avoided her eyes, from the faint electric hush in the elevators, from the sudden appearance of security officers who trailed her without speaking. War had reached its most dangerous hour, the countdown to launch. The email from Charles Cole was still fresh in her inbox, its tone carefully neutral, like a poker player trying to disguise a losing hand. "Jesse, we require your full cooperation by Monday morning. The success of Astra depends on team unity. We trust you'll make the right decision." Translation: surrender or be destroyed. She had forwarded it to Rachel with the note. "They're panicking. Prepare the cease and desist for delivery." Over the weekend, Jesse had set the final trap. She called it her fail-safe, though it was really more of a tripwire. Every critical system in Astra now required dual authentication, her key and a time-locked token that would expire 1 hour before launch. If they tried to sidestep her, the system would collapse in on itself like a house built of rigged cards. It was a subtle way of reminding them that you don't evict the architect and expect the building to stand. Meanwhile, Nathan had been working his own angles. Marcus called Jesse in a hushed voice early Sunday. "They brought in a whole team of contractors last night, outsiders. They're trying to reverse engineer your frameworks." "Let them try," Jesse replied, her tone sharp as glass. "How's the documentation coming?" "Complete," Marcus said. "Every dependency tied to your patents is flagged in red. 90% of Astra glows like a stoplight." "Good. Send me an encrypted copy." By noon, she had the file, and with it, incontrovertible proof. Volonic Systems wasn't just leaning on her innovations, they were balancing their entire future on them. That same afternoon, Rachel called with news that shifted the ground again. "Quantum Dynamics is very interested. They saw your filings in the patent system." Jesse's pulse quickened. "How interested?" "They're prepared to offer $400 million for exclusive rights, plus a $20 million signing bonus and a chief architect role." It wasn't the full $500 million she'd demanded from Volonic, but it was leverage. And leverage was the oxygen of corporate wars. Jesse smiled. "Set up a call for Monday afternoon. Make sure it's visible on my public calendar." By evening, she received the first of Nathan's increasingly desperate texts from an unknown number. "Last chance. Take the original offer or lose everything. N." She screenshotted it, added it to her growing file labeled Harassment Evidence, and set her alarm for 5 a.m. When she arrived at the tower on Monday morning, the building felt less like a workplace and more like a pressure cooker. The conference room was packed with executives, board members, and, on video screens, the nervous faces of major investors. Charles attempted composure. "We've worked tirelessly. We're prepared to offer you $10 million plus 2% of Astra's profits." Jesse didn't bother to sit. "No," Nathan erupted. "Ungrateful." "Enough, Nathan," Charles snapped, for once directing his anger at his son. But Jessie had already connected her laptop. The screen filled with Astra's architecture, dependencies glowing red. She clicked a button. The red vanished, leaving almost nothing behind. "Without my patents, this is what you have," Jessie said, her voice as cold as the rain outside. Investors muttered, board members argued, Charles's face purpled. Margaret Zhao, calm as ever, finally asked, "Ms. Carter, what are your terms?" $500 million for exclusive rights, $50 million annually otherwise. And since you wasted my time, the price rises $50 million every day you delay after today." She closed her laptop, turned for the door. "You have until 1:45 this afternoon. At 2 I'm on a call with Quantum Dynamics." The silence behind her was the sound of men who suddenly understood they were no longer playing chess. They were the pawns in a game she had already advanced 3 moves past. The hours that followed were filled with sabotage disguised as bureaucracy. Someone mysteriously deactivated her keycard. It accidentally locked her out of her email. Security trailed her through the building. None of it rattled her. She'd expected dirty tricks. What they hadn't expected was her counterstrike. At 2 p.m., the Quantum Dynamics call appeared on her calendar, visible to anyone snooping. Nathan must have seen it, because at 1:15, Charles and Nathan barged into her office, lawyers in tow. Charles didn't bother with preamble. $500 million. We'll pay it. Jessie leaned back, feigning casual thought. The price is now $550. I told you, $50 million more for every day wasted. And I want Nathan removed from Astra. For once, Charles didn't argue. He turned to his son with an expression Jessie would never forget, pure disgust. "Done," Nathan sputtered, tried to shout, but Charles silenced him with a single look. At 1:55, Jessie's phone rang, Quantum Dynamics right on schedule. She answered on speaker. "Ms. Carter, we're prepared to formalize our offer." Nathan went white. Charles signed the agreement Jessie slid across her desk. By 6 p.m., the wire transfer confirmation appeared in her inbox. $550 million. The single largest patent transaction in Volonics history. For Jessie, it wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that the underestimated architect could topple dynasties without lifting more than her pen. Proof that when you corner someone who built the foundation, the collapse isn't theirs, it's yours. But she also knew Nathan wasn't finished. Men like him never walked away from humiliation quietly. And launch day was still looming. Astra would go live within 24 hours. The trap was set. And Jessie Carter, for all her victory, still had to wonder, would the Coles try one last desperate play? The rain outside the tower turned heavier, the city shrouded in gray. War, after all, doesn't end with a single signature. It waits, breathing, until the next move is made. Launch day dawned with the city wrapped in a damp silver haze, the kind that makes streetlights glow like lanterns and nerves hum just a little sharper. For Jessie, the morning carried a taste of inevitability. She had forced Volonic into the deal. $550 million wired to her accounts, Nathan sidelined, the board begrudgingly conceding that the company's entire empire rested on her patents. By every rational measure, the war was over, but Jessie had lived long enough in corporate combat to know that men like Nathan Cole never surrendered. They plotted, they scratched, they reached for one last dagger even after the duel was done. The Astra launch was staged like a coronation. The grand auditorium was filled with reporters, investors, and engineers corralled into polite applause. On massive screens, Astra's interface pulsed in elegant blues and whites, a symphony of artificial intelligence ready to dazzle the world. Charles Cole stood at the podium, voice burnished with gravitas. "Ladies and gentlemen, today Volonic Systems redefines the future." Cameras clicked, stock tickers rolled green. The air itself seemed to swell with triumph. Back in her office, Jessie watched the broadcast on a wall of monitors. Marcus hovered by her desk, the excitement palpable. "Looks good," he whispered, as the demo began. The AI flowed like water, predictions sharp, algorithms precise, applause rolling in waves. Volonic's stock climbed double digits in minutes. For a moment, Jessie almost allowed herself to believe this chapter was truly finished. Then her phone buzzed. Alerts cascaded across the Astra dashboard, red warnings, error logs firing in quick succession. Connection failures, authentication denials, cascading system shutdowns. It was like watching a skyscraper's lights flicker out floor by floor. The room erupted in panic. Engineers scrambled, investors on the live feed frowned, Charles's confident smile faltered. Marcus stared at the screen, horrified. "What's happening?" Jessie already knew. Her failsafe had triggered. Someone was tampering with the access layers she had locked down, trying to force their way past her safeguards during a live global demo. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the intrusion. The culprit was as obvious as it was infuriating. Nathan Cole, logged in under a cloned token, attempting to wrest control from her hands. Within minutes, she was summoned to the executive conference room. The scene was chaos, board members shouting into phones, Charles sweating through his suit, investors barking questions over video feeds. And there, disheveled and red-eyed from what must have been a red-eye flight, stood Nathan. "There she is," he shouted, pointing like a prosecutor. "She built in a kill switch. She sabotaged the launch." Jessie walked straight to the nearest terminal, calm as a surgeon. "It's not a kill switch, it's a security protocol. Someone tried to bypass my authentication. The system protected itself." "Lies," Nathan barked. "She wants us dependent on her forever." Charles slammed the table. "Enough, can you fix it?" "Yes. Restore my full access and revoke Nathan's forged tokens. Give me 30 minutes. Margaret Zhao, ever the voice of reason, spoke softly. "Do it." The IT director looked between Charles, Nathan, and Jessie, then typed the commands. "Access restored." Jessie's hands flew, untangling Nathan's sabotage. Slowly, green returned to the dashboard, errors resolving one by one. 28 minutes later, Astra was alive again, humming with the power she had given it. Applause broke out, not polite this time, but desperate, relieved. Jessie turned on Nathan. "Every time you interfere, you nearly destroy everything. Maybe it's time you accept the truth. Some people are irreplaceable." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Irreplaceable? You're a liability. You'll regret this." Charles's voice cut like steel. "No, Nathan, you're the liability. Clear out your office. You're finished here." The room went silent. Nathan's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. He looked around for support, found none. His own father's eyes held nothing but exhaustion and disappointment. Nathan stormed out, slamming the door. Charles turned back to Jessie, his tone suddenly deferential. "The CIO position is yours. Full board seat. 4 million base plus equity." Jessie didn't smile. She simply said, "I'll think about it." Marcus caught up with her in the hallway, grinning ear to ear. "You just got everything. Money, power, Nathan's head on a platter." "Did I?" Jessie asked quietly. She glanced back at the glass walls of the conference room where Charles was already spinning a new narrative to investors. "Or did I just teach them they need a better cage for me?" For the rest of the day, Astra ran flawlessly. The launch was hailed as revolutionary, Volonic stock surged 30%, and Nathan's name was quietly scrubbed from internal communications. Publicly, Charles claimed credit for securing vital technology assets. Privately, every person in that building knew who had saved Astra from collapse. But Jesse wasn't fooled. Victories in corporate wars are never permanent. They are pauses, moments where the dust settles just long enough for the next battle to reveal itself. And as she watched her inbox fill with congratulatory emails and investor inquiries, she knew this war had only shifted terrain. The Cole dynasty had been wounded, humiliated, stripped of their golden sun. That kind of empire doesn't forgive. In history, too, dynasties collapse not with a single blow, but with fractures that deepen over time. Rome survived Alaric's sack but never truly recovered. Enron dazzled Wall Street until a single spark revealed the rot within. And now, Volonic, flush with the glory of its Astra launch, was already crumbling at the edges. For Jesse Carter, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The glory of Astra's launch lasted exactly 3 weeks before the facade cracked. On the surface, Volonic basked in triumph, stock price soaring, articles hailing Astra as the dawn of a new technological era. Charles Cole strutting across CNBC panels with the ease of a man convinced history had chosen him. But history is a poor servant to arrogance. Beneath the headlines, the cracks spread like hairline fractures in glass, silent but inevitable. And Jesse Carter, sitting in her loft apartment overlooking the same Seattle skyline that had framed her battles, already knew she was done with them. It started with the contract Charles had tried to sweeten. The Chief Innovation Officer position, base salary $5 million, equity, board voting power, even a custom Tesla, as if dangling shiny toys could erase months of sabotage. Every morning, a new offer. Every afternoon, another rumor of Nathan's downfall circulating through the office. But Jesse didn't want their throne. Thrones are cages in disguise, gilded and bolted. She wanted air, and the freedom to build without predators snapping at her patents. The decision crystallized on a gray Thursday. Jesse walked into Charles's office, slid the unsigned CIO contract back across his desk, and said the words he wasn't prepared to hear. "I resign, effective immediately." The look on his face would have been comic if it weren't so satisfying. "You can't be serious." "I'm done," Jesse said simply. "I'll consult remotely for the year as per our agreement. But Astra doesn't need me chained to this building, and I don't need Volonic to define me." Charles rose from his chair, circling like a cornered animal. "Is this about money? Name your price." "It's not about money. It's about vision. You and your board see me as a necessary evil to contain. I'm not here to be contained." "So you're going to quantum dynamics?" he asked, his voice dripping accusation. Jesse smiled. "No, I'm starting my own firm, with the next generation of technology I've already developed." She paused, savoring the moment. "Technology that makes Astra look like a calculator compared to a quantum computer." His face reddened. "You developed that while working here, after hours, on my own equipment, verified by my attorney, completely legal, completely mine." She held up her phone and showed him the article scheduled to go live in an hour. Jesse Carter launches AI startup with $50 million seed funding. Charles sank back into his chair, pale now, the color of a man who had just realized the foundations beneath him were built on sand. "Oh, and Charles," Jesse added almost kindly, "Marcus starts Monday." The look of betrayal on his face might have wounded another man. To Charles, it was existential. To Jesse, it was justice. By the end of the week, 3 more engineers defected to her startup. Volonic's stock dropped 18% on news of her departure. Investors whispered their doubts, clients sent cautious inquiries, and Nathan, banished to obscurity, surfaced only in whispers about some minor consulting gig in Phoenix. The dynasty that had once sneered at her was now stumbling, forced to answer questions they'd never wanted asked. Why had their star architect walked? Why had their golden son vanished? Meanwhile, Jesse's startup moved at a velocity Volonic couldn't match. Contracts with Fortune 500 companies arrived before her servers were even fully provisioned. Venture capitalists fought for Series A shares, valuations leaping from hundreds of millions to billions in less than half a year. The technology she unveiled, sleek, efficient, breathtaking in its scope, made Astra look dated overnight. Clients left Volonic in droves, chasing the future Jesse was already building. 6 months later, Jesse's company was valued at $1 billion. Volonic, once hailed as a juggernaut, was reeling. Charles sent her an email on the anniversary of that first boardroom confrontation. "You won! Congratulations!" She never replied. Some victories don't require gloating. Silence was louder. At night in her new office, a converted warehouse in South Seattle, all steel beams and floor-to-ceiling windows, she would sometimes think back to the moment Nathan Cole had first looked at her like she was nothing more than decoration. A pretty face meant to smile while men carved her life's work into pieces. How small that moment seemed now compared to the empire she had built out of defiance. History loves to disguise lessons in the voices of its conquerors, but the truth is simpler. The underestimated become dangerous when forced to fight for their place. Jessie wasn't the first. She thought of Ada Lovelace writing algorithms no man understood, Rosalind Franklin capturing the double helix while others stole the glory, Grace Hopper inventing compilers that rewrote the world. She was part of that lineage now, another name in the quiet ledger of women who refused to be erased. And when the world asked her, years later, what the secret was, Jessie always said the same thing. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something greater. Volonic had tried to cage her, to clip her wings, to plunder her golden eggs. They had underestimated her resolve. They had paid $550 million to learn that lesson. And in the end, Jessie Carter didn't just survive their betrayal. She thrived. She built an empire from the ashes of their arrogance. The skyline outside her office glittered with possibility. And Jessie smiled, not the sharp smile she'd wielded in boardrooms, but one of genuine triumph. The kind that comes not from being underestimated, but from proving once and for all that she had held all the cards from the very beginning.